If Dark Souls had a baby with Mario Maker and with Quake, I think the end product would be this game. This is Meet Your Maker. It is the most punishing, grueling, first-person experience, one-shot kill, turn the corner and you're dead, Rube Goldberg type of deaths game I've ever seen. I actually enjoy it. It definitely needs work. And if you take nothing away from this review, know that more goodness is coming, but it might not be fully on display here. So this came to me on the PlayStation Plus. It was a day-and-date release, which is awesome when Sony is able to pull these things off. It seems like Game Pass has taken a lot of that credit lately of getting games on launch. This one actually was a deal with Sony, and it's really, really cool to get to check this game out. I was very interested in it from the first time I actually saw it. Getting my hands on it, I can definitely see where they want the game to go, but it's not quite there just yet. It's going through the paces. And the game is broken down into two very distinct groups. You're either going to raid a base, is what you see me doing now. By the way, all the bases are completely made by players for players, which is really cool to think that somebody spent the amount of time to create this insane labyrinth. And there's also a base building mode later on that I'll be playing where you actually get to see the process of, albeit very, very, very basic, of actually how to build a base. So in either mode, the goal is to make money. And there's a story very loosely here where you're trying to harvest pure blood to save humanity. You can really kind of take that story and kind of toss it. It doesn't really matter. It's just an ends to the means of trying to farm for resources. So if you're in a base, what you're doing is stealing resources, not necessarily from another player, although there is a mode that can allow a player to do that at a cost of higher risk versus reward. But in this case, beating the base just gives you free money that the game generated, which allows you to go back to your base to spend more upgrades on traps or on weapons and abilities to make it a little bit easier for you to navigate through other people's bases. And you could totally play this game really from either perspective, although the base building income is significantly slower. So you're probably going to end up doing both with an emphasis, at least early on, in the base looting, the raiding part of the game, because otherwise you're going to be broke as a joke. And if you're an idiot like me and you accidentally deleted your starter base, well, you're going to have to grind for a while to get enough dough to start over and do it again. And that's my biggest lesson that I learned. Don't destroy your base, no matter how much you don't like it. Don't do that. That is a very misleading tooltip, and I hope they fix that in the future releases of this game because it is somewhat disappointing. All right, so what tools are at your disposal? Well, not much. You're going to get a melee weapon, which is going to be a sword. You're going to get a ranged weapon, which requires you to actually go back and fetch your shots after using them, which kind of sucks, but does add a level of not going trigger happy into each map. You're also going to get a small amount of tools which are consumable and have to be bought or replenished between battle that have very basic abilities, and you're going to get a grappling hook. That's all you get. That's it. That's what you're going to need to require to navigate through these insane labyrinths, which have a really cool feature to them, something that I think makes this game so much more fun. Not only do you have to get into a base and collect the treasure at the end, but you have to get back out. And that is really, really cool that that mechanic exists, because there is the ability when you're creating bases to hide traps to not appear until after the end game item has been collected, the goober, so to speak. Once you have that and you have to leave the base, then you can activate a whole new slew of traps, which makes it fun because you don't know where they're going to be. Now, obviously, they can't be where they just were, but this false confidence is what gets you. And as I stated, it's one-shot kills. So when you die, you're dead. That's it. Start over. So it's punishing, and it is frustrating when you get to the end or close to the end and you die and you have to start over. So you could see how slowly I'm walking. The tension in this is insane, and there was nothing. I just could literally have walked right out. The tension that this mechanic creates is insane. It is such a big driving force in the game that I feel keeps me coming back and makes me want to play more, because I want to see what other crazy things are out there and what other level designs are out there with the tools. Not a lot of tools yet that are in the toolbox. Those will be coming later, and I'll talk about those a little bit later on when I get into the base building part of the video around the, I don't know, 10 minute or so mark. I'm looking at my timeline here. When you finish a base, you're going to get a bunch of different items. There are different types of currency, and there are different vendors that exist in your headquarters, essentially, that allow you to cash in. When you select a base, you're going to very quickly be able to... when you select a base to raid, I should say, there's a list of very easy bases, kind of hard bases, or punishingly hard. The one you just saw me beat was of the punishingly hard variety, and despite you see me beating it in 2 playthroughs, it actually took me 14 playthroughs to ultimately beat. Probably a little more north of an hour or so, just trying again and again and again, getting slightly farther each time, or trying to just rush through it and forgetting something and paying the price. And that mechanic exists, and you basically pick what type of map you want to do based on how hard it's going to be and what kind of rewards you want to get at the end. So if you want to get something that is more basic, you could just do an easy base, and you'll get a basic amount of rewards. No biggie. If you want to go for the big haul and you want to have lots of traps that you could destroy for lots of materials, well, then you want to go for the more difficult maps. And there's no penalty for trying and dying. You don't lose anything. And as I said, the person who designed this, they're going to get money every time you die, which is generated for free. You're going to steal their money, which is generated for free. So it's not like you're hurting other players by, crushing, bashing your head against your controller trying to win. In the same vein, they're not really hurting you other than your pride, because you're embarrassed because you should be better at games and you're not. The way that the flow of the game works is ultimately as you're kind of navigating through these levels, you want to go slow. And you're listening for sounds of like the gurgling of enemies and footsteps, and the game does give you a very, very brief damage indicator to tell you, hey, you're about to die, or a trap has been triggered, or something is about to hurt you. Typically, if you've been very slow and cautious, you could simply just turn around and leave. That's kind of the best thing. Just like back out and like, nope, start over again. But in a situation like where I am right now, I've already shot both of my guns. I don't have any ammo, so now I have to run in and do melee while I'm dodging other characters, while I'm dodging the traps that are going on in the world. And this is where it starts to get challenging. Maps very often have this mechanic of the kill box, where you'll just throw bunches of traps in a room and just hope that you're too stupid to, the player's too stupid and just gets overcome and dies. Now, the gimmick is there's this little tiny like monster thing. He's the guy who is extracting the essence for the player. That's kind of the story behind it. You can follow them, and they will take the path of least resistance, obviously not triggering any traps. They'll take the path of least resistance to the goober for you to know which way you have to navigate, because some of these maps can absolutely be a total labyrinth in design and incredibly difficult to navigate. So if you're just very cautious and take your time, the game will show you where you need to go to leave. However, doing that is a very, very challenging thing. And it's not always the most advantageous to kind of wait for that little monster, because you're probably going to get a little tired of waiting because he goes slow and you're not going to be able to keep up. So there is a sense of guidance there, and there's always this feeling of kind of risk and reward. There's no limit on time. There's no reward for beating a dungeon faster or slower than another dungeon. It's just about you and your tolerance as a player. And I can tell you, as you're dying time and time and time again on a map, your patience is going to wear thin, and you're most likely going to want to move out and get into something a little different. And I think that's a key here. So I left this on the screen just to briefly show you that there are different resources with different vendors. You can see that in the tribute level in the upper right. There are vendors that sell unique weapons for you. There are vendors that give you new traps to put into your dungeon. There are vendors that give you new types of abilities like weapons and that sort of thing. The list is small, but there's 5 different currencies essentially that you're going to have to manage. And that's what's going to allow you to build a better hunter or focus more on the base building. Base building is very, very simple and very complex at the same time. If you've played Minecraft, you're probably going to be pretty good at putting together at least a very basic base. You buy a plot of land that is already pre-rendered and designed, and the goober will already be somewhere in the map. That's my biggest frustration, is you can't determine where that is because, in my opinion, it does stifle you creatively. The different amount of money that a map costs is only designed to see how long you have to check back in before you take all the money out of the bank. So in this particular base that I'm building, I think I can only capture like 1,000 souls basically of people who tried and died before I'm not getting any new currency. I have to log in and continue to, basically cash out of the bank. If I bought a more expensive map, well, I would have a significantly higher amount of currency that would allow me to essentially, not have to log in as often. This game absolutely is going to thrive on the player community. It's going to absolutely thrive on if there's impacts to this game that people are like, wow, this is fun, I want to go keep playing. If not, and this game was not advertised at all, I worry that when the player community fades, you're going to build these really cool designs that aren't going to be put in rotation as often, and you're probably going to feel burnt out, and you're probably not going to feel rewarded, particularly because you're busting your butt on a creation that not a lot of people are going to see. They do have friends codes, so you can find a specific social list to play on. And as I mentioned, you can put modifiers on your base where you take more risk and reward, assuming you built a really challenging base, and you take more money away when people die, or you earn more money, that sort of thing. You give away more money if they're successful. Most people are going to turn all that off, and they're just going to try to get a slow passive drip of income because this game is grindy. There's not a lot of stuff to do outside of the core mechanics, as I mentioned, and the parts that you get, while they are cool, are going to take you a long time to build up the base you want. You're going to start with very, very basic traps and a very, very basic AI that you can path, basically tell them where to patrol and where to stand, but they're very, very easily thwarted. And you're not going to, even the most creative minds are going to be limited with the very basic tools that are at your disposal. As time goes on, and you continue to invest not in your hunter, but in the technology you need to research as a character, that your base building will become better. You'll get better stuff to do. You'll get really cool, interesting traps, and then I think you'll start to have some fun. I think that's where the games hurts. I think that's the lack of the game's progression, I think, is what hurts the game a lot there, because ultimately you're kind of just going to be in limbo for a while. And while the tool sets are very intuitive to use, you have various blocks and shapes like triangles and diamonds and pyramids to manipulate, to not just have a flat basic terrain like I'm doing here. Plus all the decorations you can put on the wall to kind of disguise your traps so they look like they're just part of the ambient environment. While that's all very cool and interesting, it costs money. And you're going to very quickly realize that you can't do what you want. Now, there is a pretty healthy capacity in the game. This particular base I'm in is a 2,500 capacity. Each thing you spend costs capacity. Walls are worth 1, traps are worth like 10 or 50, AI is worth a little bit more than that. And you can put modifiers on them too. As I mentioned earlier when I was showing off the gameplay of running through the map, you can absolutely put down traps that only trigger on the way out, or traps that shoot twice, or traps that have some sort of secondary effect when they're deployed or destroyed. So you can get creative. You can obviously spend time with a lot of the materials to try to create a more cool aesthetic. I've already got some interesting ideas that I want to do just for the sake of having fun and doing a wild map. The problem is, though, is when a character is selecting what run they want to do, the only thing they get to choose from is if the map is considered easy, medium, or hard. And the game will determine that for you based on the amount of currency and traps that you have. So the first map that I made, which is what you're seeing here, it was considered like a medium difficulty because I put in a lot of traps. Somebody who's just kind of wanting to play casually will never see my map. So you're kind of limiting the player base there based on that choice. And since there are so many choices at the beginning, I think you have 5 or 6 choices for each category. Your map might not be called into rotation often. And if it's not called into rotation, you're not going to get those big chunks of money from people dying on it. You will still get a passive income, but it's just not going to be as rewarding when you log in and see that like only 3 people played your map over the weekend that you spent hours designing. And you can't really generate more traffic for your particular base either. So there is definitely a limitation there of how the system is kind of in place. But you do get plenty of stuff to work with, at least decoration-wise early on, which is nice. The developers have already laid out a roadmap for what they want to do in the future, which does include additional traps, guns, and weapons, because you'll find that, initially it seems overwhelming of all the things you can do and all the places you can put things and how everything just works because it's all snapped together. But ultimately, what's going to happen is you're going to kind of say, oh, I wish I could do more, or oh, why can't I do that? Like, for example, this really cool pinstripe wall that I thought would have been really neat to put on a couple walls to kind of do like a cool funhouse effect. Well, if you do that effect, you can't put any traps on that wall at all. So guess what? Everybody is going to know. Everybody's going to know that that's a safe place to stand. And you can't really disguise stuff as well as you want to because of that. So you're going to either have a very bland-looking Quake-type base where everything is like metal and blood, and you're going to have tons of traps disguised there, or you're going to have a bright, colorful base with lots of cool aesthetics, but everybody kind of knows like, oh, this is a pretty safe place to walk through. So you kind of have to figure out what aesthetics you want, and I think there's some limitations right now in the system that can honestly be done better. That's going to allow you as a player to essentially, have a little bit more creativity. But I think, again, this game is going to ride or die on the fan base. If this game is cross-play and is supporting tons and tons of players and lots of new content and maps and ideas, and they do have a healthy roadmap going in the future, well, then I absolutely think this is a game that's worth your time and maybe your money if they do some fun cosmetic DLCs. However, if this game dies on the vine and doesn't generate a lot of interest, and they're really slow in upgrading a lot of the new stuff that's supposed to be coming, some of the new feature sets, some of the new traps, you're going to get bored of only using the same gun and the same sword and the same grappling hook over and over and over. Well, I think this game's going to die a very slow death, and that's unfortunate. Now, PlayStation Plus does have a very large berth of fans and players, so you've got to naturally think there's a lot of people who are going to instantly gravitate to this, kind of like how Rocket League became a smash hit very quickly based solely on the sheer amount of people playing it. I just don't know if Sony did a good enough job or this game studio did a good enough job of getting the word out there. And I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But in terms of form and function and functionality, it works well enough. I think you'll find the early game is probably, you get a lot of stuff early on and then the grind begins. You're not going to have a whole lot of traps to play with. But if you enjoy this kind of like dungeon hell game where you just screw with people and every turn is, there's 6 traps in the same area. You're looking to the left and they get you to the right, or, you get stabbed in the back because you're not looking in this direction. Well, yeah, you can have a lot of fun with this. And in that Dark Souls sense of, victory and beating the dungeon, it isn't a very natural high. And you may say, you know what? I struggled with this. It took me an hour to beat this map. I'm so glad I did. Just don't expect a significant reward that's going to allow you to go out and buy tons of things because it's not quite there. Did I mention this game has invisible walls? I don't have it unlocked here, but let me tell you, invisible walls absolutely changes how this game is played, because things that you think are safe, like floors, are actually lava pits, or enemies are hiding where you walk by them and you don't know until they shoot you in the back, and it just creates a very tense moment. So, mixed review on this game, but I wanted to be honest and give some gameplay and my impressions. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. Sound off in the comments below. Let me know if you checked it out and what you think. Thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.